Lena Carver tried to swallow the lump in her throat, but the tears betrayed her first. She sat alone at the corner table of Café Marlowe, her mascara smudged and a half-eaten croissant untouched on her plate. She wiped her cheek quickly, hoping no one noticed, but it was already too late. A soft sniffle escaped, and the man at the table beside hers turned his head. He didn't say anything, just looked. But his eyes lingered a second too long. Lena dropped her gaze to her lap and gripped her phone tightly, the memory of the date still fresh and humiliating. It wasn't even the worst date she'd been on, just the most soul-crushing. Trevor had spent the entire dinner talking about his job, checking his watch, and then left her with the bill because, quote, "You picked the place." She had picked the place. But that wasn't the point. The man beside her cleared his throat softly and signaled the waiter. She didn't look up. Her eyes were burning again. "Excuse me," a voice said, not too close but not far, deep calm. "Are you okay?" She looked up, startled. The man had turned his chair slightly toward her, his dark hair tousled like he'd run his hand through it too many times. His sharp jaw and serious blue eyes made him look like he belonged on a movie poster, not sipping espresso in a quiet cafe. "I'm fine," she said automatically, her voice cracking. "You don't look fine." "I'm just having a bad day," she muttered, brushing her hair behind her ear, embarrassed. "Sorry, I don't usually cry in public." He tilted his head. "This place is full of people pretending they're not falling apart." "You're the bravest one here." That made her laugh just a little. "Thanks, that's weirdly comforting." "I'm Vince Langston," he said, holding out a hand. She took it hesitantly. "Lena Carver." "Nice to meet you, Lena Carver," he paused. "Do you want to talk about it?" She hesitated. Then shook her head. "It's stupid. I went on a date. It was awful. He left me with the check and told me I talked too much." Vince's eyes darkened, just a flicker. "Sounds like an idiot." "He is. But I still feel like an idiot for thinking it was going to be different this time." He leaned back, studying her. "You shouldn't. You showed up. You were open. That's rare." She blinked. "Are you always this philosophical with strangers in cafes?" He smiled. "Only the ones crying into their lattes." That made her laugh again. A real one this time. The waiter came by with a fresh drink and a slice of lemon cake, neither of which Lena ordered. Vince nodded toward them. "Try the cake. It's the best thing here." She stared at it, then at him. "You ordered this for me?" "Technically, I bribed the waiter to pretend it was a surprise from the universe." She looked at the cake, then back at him, touched despite herself. "That's actually kind of sweet." "I have moments." She picked up her fork, and for the first time in hours she didn't feel like crying. They sat there for nearly an hour, talking like they weren't complete strangers. He asked questions, real ones, not the kind people ask just to fill silence. And when she told him about her job as a florist and her dream of opening her own shop, he listened like it mattered. "You smell like roses," he said at one point. She laughed. "Probably because I was elbow deep in them this morning." "Still," he said, "it suits you." Eventually, she checked the time and sighed. "I should go. I have to be up early." He didn't push, just nodded. "Can I walk you out?" They stepped into the cool fall air and she wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck. Vince walked beside her in silence, his hands in the pockets of his dark wool coat. He didn't ask for her number, didn't make it weird. And somehow that made her wish he would. At the corner, she stopped. "Thanks for the cake, and for not letting me cry alone." He looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "You deserve someone who wants to hear you talk all night." She swallowed. "That would be nice. Maybe next time you'll find someone who actually sees you." She nodded slowly, her heart doing something it hadn't done in a long time. "Hope." "Good night, Lena." "Good night, Vince." She turned and walked away, thinking it was just a kind moment with a stranger. What she didn't know was that Vince Langston wasn't just a stranger. He was the millionaire founder of Langston and Hart, one of the most sought-after luxury architecture firms in the city. And he wasn't going to forget the girl who cried in a cafe, not for a second. Lena tugged the ribbon tighter around the bouquet, her fingers slightly stiff from the early morning chill seeping through the cracked window of the shop. The scent of freesia and eucalyptus filled the cramped space, as she stepped back to assess her arrangement. It wasn't perfect. One of the lilies leaned a touch too far left, but it would do. The bell above the door chimed and she turned, brushing a leaf from her apron. Her boss, Marcia, bustled in holding 2 steaming cups of coffee and a folded newspaper wedged beneath her arm. "I brought the good stuff," Marcia said, setting 1 cup beside Lena's elbow. "Not that watery nonsense from the corner bodega." Lena offered a tired smile. "You're my hero." Marcia paused, her gaze sweeping over Lena's hunched shoulders. "Rough night?" "I'm fine," Lena said too quickly, then sighed. "One of those dates where you remember why you'd rather be elbow-deep in peonies than making small talk with a guy who thinks I work in flowers means I have no ambition." Marcia made a noise somewhere between a grunt and a laugh. "Men who think ambition comes with a briefcase and a Bluetooth earpiece are a dying breed. Hopefully." "I'd like to see the extinction chart," Lena muttered. Marcia raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Instead, she nudged the newspaper forward. "You might want to glance at page 4. Society section." Lena blinked. "Since when do I raid the society section?" "Since the man you were sitting next to yesterday is apparently Manhattan's most elusive millionaire." Lena froze. "What?" Marcia tapped the page. "Vince Langston, founder of Langston and Hart. They just broke ground on that luxury development in Tribeca. Word is he avoids press like the plague, but someone snapped a photo of him leaving Café Marlowe yesterday, alone, which, apparently, is newsworthy." Lena's eyes dropped to the grainy photo. Sure enough, there he was, same tousled hair, same coat, same quiet intensity. The caption read, "Langston spotted solo again." She stared at it, her heart thudding unevenly. "I had no idea." Marcia sipped her coffee. "He's a hard one to pin down. Doesn't show up to the usual fundraisers, no arm candy, barely any interviews. People call him Manhattan's ghost." Lena set the bouquet down before her grip crushed the stems. "He didn't act like someone who builds skyscrapers for billionaires." Marcia shrugged. "Maybe that's why he's good at it." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of flower deliveries and walk-in orders, but Lena's thoughts kept circling back to Vince. The way he'd listened without interruption. The warmth behind his words, the fact that he hadn't even hinted at who he was. By early afternoon, she told herself to let it go. He was probably already halfway across the world sketching villas in the Maldives or whatever people like him did on a Tuesday. But at precisely 3:30, the bell above the door jingled again, and he walked in, no cameras, no entourage. Just Vince, holding his coat over one arm, his eyes scanning the shop until they landed on her. She stepped out from behind the workbench, heart pounding faster than she wanted it to. "I was hoping I'd guessed the right shop," he said. She fumbled for a response. "You were looking for me?" "I was," he said simply, "though I realize this might come off as strange." "Not strange," she said quickly. "Just unexpected." He took a cautious step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "I didn't say anything yesterday because I didn't want it to matter. But I'm not great at leaving things unfinished." Lena crossed her arms, unsure whether to laugh or panic. "What exactly feels unfinished?" "You." The word hung in the air between them. He didn't rush to fill the silence, didn't try to charm his way around it. He just stood there, calm and certain. "I read the paper," she said finally, his jaw twitched. "Yeah, I figured you might. You're a millionaire." "Yes, you own a luxury architecture firm, guilty. And yet you bought me lemon cake and listened to me cry about a guy who ghosted me after 30 minutes. He tilted his head. It wasn't about the cake. She tried to read the expression in his eyes, but it wasn't one she'd seen before. Not pity, not amusement, just something focused and unapologetically honest. "I thought you'd assume I was trying to impress you if I told you who I was," he added. "But I wasn't. I still'm not." Lena walked slowly around the counter, her apron dusted with specks of pollen. "So what are you doing?" he exhaled, as if he'd rehearsed a dozen versions of this conversation and none of them felt right until now. "I was hoping I could see you again, not in a cafe by accident." "Not because you're crying, just because I want to," she hesitated. "People like you don't usually date florists from Queens." He raised a brow. People like me, ones who show up in newspapers. Ones who build glass towers while I'm trying to keep my cooler from breaking down every other week. He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne subtle, unfamiliar. I don't care about any of that. And I get the feeling you don't either. She searched his face for any trace of performance, but there was only quiet conviction. I close the shop at 6, she said. A slow, genuine smile curved his mouth. I'll be here. And just like that, he walked out. Lena stared at the door long after he'd gone. Marcia poked her head in from the back room. Was that who I think it was? Lena nodded slowly. Well, Marcia said, returning to her clipboard, make sure you change out of your pollen-covered apron before he gets back. Millionaires might not care, but I do. But Lena didn't move. She just stood there, wondering how a stranger in a cafe had cracked something open in her she hadn't even realized was locked shut. The first thing Lena noticed when Vince returned at 6 was that he wasn't wearing the same coat. This one was darker, sleeker, the collar turned up against the evening breeze. It wasn't flashy, nothing about him screamed wealth, but it was the kind of coat that looked like it came with a private tailor and a driver waiting outside. She had changed into a navy sweater and jeans, her apron tossed in the back room. Her hair was down now, curling slightly from the humidity of the flower cooler, and she still had a smear of pink pollen on the edge of her thumbnail. She didn't wipe it off. You ready? Vince asked, his eyes sweeping over her like he was memorizing something important. Depends, she said, reaching for her bag. Are you taking me somewhere with a chandelier and a dress code? No chandeliers, he replied. But there might be candles. She followed him out, locking the door behind her. The street was quiet, the city just beginning to glow with its usual evening pulse. When they reached the corner, a black sedan idled at the curb. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Lena hesitated. You have a driver? I don't like wasting time looking for parking. She slid inside, the seats buttery soft beneath her. Vince climbed in beside her, giving the driver a short nod before the door closed and they pulled into traffic. Where are we going? She asked. You'll see. It took them less than 15 minutes to reach an ivy-covered brownstone nestled on a street she'd never walked down before. Vince led her up the steps, pulling a key from his coat pocket. The lock turned with a soft click, and he pushed the door open to reveal a warm, golden space filled with light and the scent of something roasting. You cook? Lena asked, stepping inside cautiously. No, he said, closing the door behind her. But I know someone who does. He gestured toward the kitchen, where a woman in her 60s lifted her hand in greeting before returning to stirring a pot on the stove. Carmen's worked with my family since I was a teenager. She agreed to help me tonight. Lena turned to him slowly. You arranged a private dinner in your home with a personal chef. I figured we had enough loud restaurants between us. Thought you might prefer something quieter. She looked around. The living room was spacious and unpretentious, filled with worn leather, warm wood, and framed sketches of buildings she didn't recognize. A fireplace glowed in the corner and soft instrumental jazz played from somewhere unseen. This doesn't look like I imagined, she said. Vince tilted his head. How did you imagine it? Glass everything, cold colors, maybe a white grand piano no one plays, he smiled faintly. That's my office, I live here. Carmen appeared a moment later with 2 plates and a warm nod before disappearing again. They sat at a small table near the fireplace, a bottle of wine already opened between them. Lena took a bite and closed her eyes. This is incredible. I told Carmen to cook whatever she'd make for herself on a good day. Lena leaned back, still chewing. Why me? He didn't ask what she meant. Because you were honest when you didn't have to be, and because I didn't want to stop thinking about you, but I couldn't figure out why until today. And you're the first person in a long time who didn't want anything from me. She set her fork down. That's not exactly true. I wanted cake, he laughed, and the sound was low and easy. That was a good trade. They ate slowly, the conversation turning toward everything they hadn't said before. She asked about his childhood, And he told her about growing up in a house that was always being renovated but never quite finished. He asked about her parents, and she told him how they ran a deli in Astoria until her mother's back gave out and her father's eyesight began to fade. "So you took over the family business?" he asked. "Not exactly. I started with a booth at a farmer's market. I didn't want to smell like pastrami forever. Good choice." After dinner, Vince poured them each another glass of wine and led her to the rooftop. The view stretched out in every direction, the skyline glittering under the moonlight. He'd set up 2 chairs and a thick wool blanket, which he draped over her lap before sitting beside her. "I used to come up here when I couldn't sleep," he said quietly. "Thought maybe you'd like it too." She pulled the blanket tighter. "It's beautiful." He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "I don't do this." She looked at him. "What, cook dinner for strangers? I don't invite women into my house. I don't sit on rooftops hoping they'll stay a little longer." Lena's throat tightened. "Then why am I here?" "Because you feel like the only real thing I've had in a long time." She didn't know what to say to that. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the way it wasn't demanding but open, like he was giving her the choice to walk away or lean in. "I'm not used to this either," she said. "And I don't know where it's going, but I don't want to run from it." Something in his shoulders eased just slightly. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then stay a little longer." She did. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But the air between them was charged with the kind of silence that only exists when 2 people have stopped pretending they aren't already falling. And as the stars blinked above the city, Lena felt something she hadn't in a long time, like she might finally be exactly where she was meant to be. Lena pushed open the door to her flower shop, the familiar scent of damp stems and aging petals greeting her like an old friend. The morning sun filtered through the front windows, catching on the dust in the air and turning it to gold. She crossed to the register, flipping on the lights with a soft click. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind. Late-night rooftop talks that turned into early morning walks through quiet streets. Vince showing up with warm croissants before her deliveries. Her fingers brushing his when he handed her his coffee mug, a quiet current always running between them that neither tried to explain anymore. But this morning she felt it. The shift. She opened the register drawer, then stopped as her phone buzzed. Marcia's name lit up the screen. "Hey," Lena said, tucking the phone between her shoulder and ear as she arranged a delivery slip. "Have you checked your inbox?" Marcia's voice was sharp, urgent. "No, I just got in." "Why, do it now." Lena set down the slip, pulled her laptop from beneath the counter and opened it. Her inbox was flooded. Subject lines blurred together. Langston and Heart feature, Morning Bloom mention, Floral Muse of Manhattan. "What is this?" she whispered. "There's an article on the New York Ledger site. It went up last night, front page of the lifestyle section today. Someone leaked a story about Vince about you." Lena clicked the link and froze. The headline read, "Langston's Muse, mysterious florist linked to elusive architect." Her name was in the first paragraph. The piece detailed their quiet dinners, unusual courtship, and unlikely connection. There was a photo blurry, but clearly her walking beside Vince outside his brownstone, another of her locking up the flower shop, her stomach twisted. "I didn't ask for this," she said, voice thin. "I know," Marcia replied, "but it's out now." The bell above the door jingled. Lena looked up, expecting a delivery driver. It was Vince. He wasn't wearing his usual calm. His jaw was tight, his eyes storm dark as he crossed the room. "I just came from a meeting," he said. Every board member had that article printed in front of them. "My assistant's phone hasn't stopped ringing. Investors are asking if I'm distracted." She shut the laptop. "I didn't say anything. I never would." "I know that," he said. "I'm not here to accuse you." "Then why do you look like you're about to tell me goodbye?" He didn't answer right away. He walked over to the front window, looked out at the street, his hands in his pockets. "I've spent years keeping my life compartmentalized. Work, home, nothing in between. No mess, no risk." Lena's chest tightened. "And I'm the mess, you're the risk," he said. "The one thing I didn't plan for, and now it's all unraveling." She crossed the room, her voice low but steady. "You're unraveling because someone took a photo. Because people found out you care about someone who doesn't fit their mold. It's not just about them," he said, turning toward her. "It's about you. I don't want this circus to touch you." "It already has," she said, "and I'm still here." He didn't reach for her. That hurt more than she expected. "I need time to fix this," he said. Lena stepped back, a bloom of cold spreading through her chest. "You can't fix me out of it, Vince. I'm not a headline you can manage." "I know," he said quietly. "But I have to protect what I've built." She held his gaze for a long beat, then gave a single nod. "Then go protect it." He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He just turned and walked out the door. 3 days passed. The shop was quieter than usual. A few curious customers stopped by, clearly hoping to see the florist from the article. Lena kept her head down, her voice polite but clipped. Marcia watched her with a strange mix of sympathy and restraint, never pushing. On the 4th day, just after closing, Lena stepped outside to lock up and nearly tripped over it, a crate. Wooden. Elegant. With a single white calla lily resting on top. She bent to open it, confused. Inside were hundreds of roses, not red but pale lavender, each stem wrapped in soft paper. Nestled among them, an envelope with her name in bold, architectural lettering. She opened it with shaking fingers. "Lena, I tried to protect you by pulling away. But all I did was make it worse. I built towers to keep people out. But you walked into my life and made me want to leave the walls behind. Come to the Langston and Hart Gala tonight. There's something I need to say. To everyone, your seat is reserved. Your name is on the list. I'll be waiting." She stood frozen for a long moment, then turned and ran inside. Marcia was halfway through shutting off the lights. "You need a dress," Marcia said before Lena could speak. "Come on." An hour later, Lena stood in the back of a sleek black car, her heart pounding as they pulled up to an event hall she'd only ever seen in magazines. Photographers flanked the entrance, their cameras flashing with frantic energy. But when she stepped out, the noise shifted. Because Vince was already there, standing at the top of the steps in a dark suit, his eyes locked on hers the moment she emerged. Gasps rippled as he descended, not stopping until he stood in front of her, offering his hand. "Is this too much?" he asked. "Yes," she said, her voice catching, "but I don't care." He brought her hand to his chest. "I told myself I had everything I needed. But the truth is, none of it means anything without you." Cameras clicked, but neither of them looked away. "I love you, Lena Carver. I don't care who knows it. I don't care what it costs. I'd trade every tower I've ever built for one more morning with you." She pressed her forehead to his. "You don't have to trade anything. Just stay." He kissed her, then deep, certain, in front of everyone, and for once Lena didn't cry, she just held on. Because she wasn't a story anymore, she was his, and he was hers. Lena stepped down from the final stair of Vince's penthouse, her heels clicking softly against the marble. The entire top floor had been transformed for the gala's after-party low lighting, a jazz trio playing near the terrace, and clusters of guests sipping cocktails while trying not to stare at her. But she didn't feel out of place. Not tonight. She wove through the room, her fingers brushing the velvet of her dress deep emerald, custom-tailored hours earlier by someone Vince had called in a favor from. The fabric hugged her like a second skin, elegant without being loud. As she passed the windows, the city blinked beneath her, far away and insignificant. At the far end of the room, Vince stood with a silver-haired man in a navy dinner jacket. He looked over his shoulder the moment she approached. "Excuse me," Vince said to the man, touching his arm briefly before turning toward her. "I was starting to think you'd vanished. You left me with a woman who asked if I arranged flowers for royalty," she said. "I needed air. I'll reassign her to someone less curious, no need." I told her yes and walked away. His laugh was quiet, but his eyes crinkled in that way she'd started to look for even before he smiled. Lena took a sip from her champagne flute, then tilted her head. "Who was that?" "Robert Chen, one of our international investors. He's been circling this project for over a year. Tonight sealed it. Because of the gala." Because I finally showed him I wasn't afraid to put my name behind something real. Vince leaned closer. That was you. She looked at him over the rim of her glass. So I'm the face of your business strategy now, that and my personal one. She set the glass down on the edge of a side table. You know, you didn't have to make that speech. The article would have faded. People would have moved on. I didn't want it to fade. He took her hand, his thumb brushing against the top of her knuckles. I wanted it to be known, you're not a footnote in my story, you are the story. Before she could answer, a voice called out from across the room. A woman in a shimmering black dress waved, motioning Vince over. He lifted one brow at Lena, silently asking, "Go," she said. "I'll be fine." He kissed her temple before stepping away, and she turned toward the terrace, needing a moment with the wind and the skyline. The city stretched wide beneath the stars, the air crisp but not cold. She leaned on the stone railing, watching the cars crawl like lit beads along the avenues. Behind her, the music shifted to something softer, slower. "You look like someone who's thinking too much," came a familiar voice. Lena didn't turn. "I'm trying to picture where my cooler would go in a place like this." Vince joined her at the railing, his hands resting beside hers. "Want me to draw up blueprints? Only if you include space for a stubborn air conditioner and a bucket of week-old tulips." "I'll see what I can do," she glanced at him. "You really think this can work? Me running a shop that smells like dirt and you hosting events where people wear cufflinks that cost more than my rent." "I don't think it'll work because of what we do, Lena. I think it'll work because we don't care about that part." She studied him, the shadows softening the lines of his face. "You're serious about this?" He turned fully toward her. "I bought the building next to your shop." Her mouth parted. "You what?" "It was up for sale. I signed the papers yesterday." He reached into his inside pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "I'm not touching your store. But I want to help you expand. A new cooler, more space, a design studio in the back if you want to do events or weddings." She took the paper with trembling fingers. It wasn't just talk. It was a full architectural sketch, clean lines and soft curves, a garden wall connecting her current building to the one next door. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "I know, that's why it's real. No conditions, no strings, just a gift from me. To the woman who made me want to build something that wasn't made of steel and glass." She blinked back, the sudden sting in her eyes. "You're going to ruin me with this." "I plan to ruin you with a lot more," he said, starting with a proposal. Lena's breath caught. "What?" He reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a ring box. He didn't get down on one knee, he didn't need to. The way he looked at her, like she was the only thing anchoring him to the ground, said everything. "I don't want to wait. I don't need a year-long engagement or a destination ceremony. I want you in my life every morning, every night. I want arguments about flower deliveries and paint samples. I want you." She opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd imagined, no oversized diamond, just a delicate gold band with a single emerald-cut stone, pale as morning light. Elegant, quiet, like him? "Yes," she said, voice breaking. "Yes, Vince." He pulled her into him, kissing her with a depth that silenced everything else. The music, the noise of the city, the clinking glasses inside, they all disappeared. Later that night, they stood alone in the rooftop garden above the penthouse. The guests had gone, the musicians packed up. The city was quieter now, the kind of hush that only came just before dawn. "I used to think I needed to be alone to stay in control," Vince said, his arm wrapped around her waist. "But then you showed up with pollen on your cheek and ruined all my rules." Lena leaned into him. "I didn't mean to." "I'm glad you did." Below them, the skyline shimmered. Inside, the future waited. And in that moment, wrapped in each other and the promise of everything they hadn't yet built, they knew one thing for certain: there would be no turning back. The following spring, the expanded storefront opened with a quiet ribbon-cutting ceremony. No press, no cameras. Just Vince, holding the scissors, and Lena, standing beside him in a sundress with her hair twisted up in a way he loved. They named it Carver and Vine. Inside, the air smelled like lilac and possibility. And in the back room, beneath the skylight, Vince had insisted on installing himself. Lena kissed her husband before returning to her blooming world, because their life wasn't just built on grand gestures and rooftop confessions. It was built on the everyday kind of love. And that, they knew, was the most luxurious thing of all.